Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 26 of Leppy Duels. I'm your host, Jacob Arvidson. We are once again sponsored by Jarvie Media. Thanks to everyone at home for watching. If you don't know how the show works, go check out the intro of a previous episode. We're going to jump right into it and meet the cast for episode 26. First up, defending his title from last episode, Brian Papa Wolf Frawley. Taking on Brian in the first round, the brand manager at Latitude 64, joining us from Rock Hill, South Carolina, Seth Fenley. Next up, our third guest this week is the captain of Team Discraft Underground. Give it up for Wes Shinovar. And rounding out the cast this week, hailing from Kalamazoo, Michigan, it's Zach O'Haron. Thanks all four of you for being with us this week. Star-studded cast once again. We appreciate you guys being here. Let's jump right into it. The DGPT made a press release this past week. Couple new things rolling out that we'll talk about throughout the episode. First thing we want to address is the tour schedule. For you guys at home and for these guys on the show this week, what is the most notable change that you saw for the 2024 schedule? Brian, take us away.
I think for somebody that's been a fan of the Pro Tour and been watching disc golf since before the Pro Tour, it's obviously shocking not to start in a desert climate, if you will. Whether that's Memorial or LVC or Gentlemen's Club Classic or whatever event that we morphed out there. We saw the writing on the wall. We knew this was coming, we thought. But for me, it just is different. Not that different is bad, but different for sure. I will miss as a personal fan. I will miss going to Phoenix and seeing all the people that were about to head to LVC or coming right back from LVC on their way for the Texas swing. And I know that will hurt at least the Memorial probably for registration, but it might help a different area of the disc golf world with registration in Florida. But yeah, different, but definitely not wrong.
All right, Seth, what's your take here?
Yeah, so I think that the thing that stands out the most to everyone, Florida makes a lot of sense. I've got 3 points actually as to why Florida matters, but I think that in order to have some differentiation here, the thing that shocked the world the most was when we changed from having Champions Cup in April to October. And I think that this does a few things. One, it allowed for that geographical shift to happen more easily because now it makes sense to start the season in Florida, ended in Georgia, make one big circle. And so that's one of the reasons why Florida makes sense, but it's also a good argument towards the Champions Cup as well. The Champions Cup additionally elongates the season, right? It makes it to where we're ending the season with a major, which historically the season has ended USDGC Tour Championship. And I think that that in and of itself has created a pretty significant shock, both to the players for having to play a longer season, but also to the fans for having to see how the full season plays out all the way into the end of October.
All right, Brian, go ahead and respond to Seth's comments and talk a little bit more about yours as well.
Yeah, so again, the most shocking change to me is the starting location. It's out in the West. The geographical circle, the ending, I think it does make sense. It's very obvious here, but the fact that we will be flip-flopping and reversing the whole thing right off the get-go, to me is just the shocking part.
Okay, Seth?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I think Brian could have done to make his argument a little bit better in regards to why Florida matters more. Specifically, it's hitting a needed demographic, right? We've seen people arguing for Florida for a while. Additionally, it adds a new course to the tour, which is something else that people have done. Neither one of those were arguments that Brian made, though. And so because of that, maybe I can win the Florida point, but even if I don't win the Florida point, I think that Georgia matters just as much because it was a time in the schedule that's been set for the past 2 years that has now changed. And like I said, elongated the schedule, which is something that concerns both the fans and the professionals, and not something that Brian really adequately responded to.
All right, Seth, I like how you summed it up, honestly, in your rebuttal. I'm going to give you the point here. I think, yes, ending in Georgia is definitely a notable change. You both talked about Florida and no Western start to the tour. I like that you brought that up. That's important. But Seth's going to win duel number 1. Sends us to the second one, Zach and Wes. We're continuing with the Pro Tour's press release from this past week. They got rid of the silver events, and they now have a qualifying series involved. What, in regards to this change, what did they get right? What did they get wrong? Zach, you've got the floor.
No, I think it's right, just in general. The fact that we changed the Silver Series from being an event that pro players had to go to for points to now having a qualifying series so that you actually have a series here that can follow the tour. Right now, it's like 18 events over 32 weeks or 33 weeks, something like that. So you have 15 weeks somewhere that you can play in events for qualifying. And it's no longer going to be, hey, I'm going to go to this event, either local or I'm kind of a mid-tier player trying to get my points. And I show up and the top 10 guys or women are there to just take the points away from me. Like, that's just not anymore. I can actually go earn a tour card now because I can go to a qualifying event. And they've separated it from being a top tier kind of tour and like you're trying to get into that tour. And them separating it is an awesome thing for this upcoming year. I can't wait to see how this. We have more details to come. I can't wait to hear about them.
Wes, what's your take here?
Well, I'd love to see Zach go earn his tour card at one of these events that he's so excited about. I think that they got this right as well. The players have really been calling for a shorter tournament schedule or just having less tournaments in general. I know a lot of the players that are on tour the last 2 years have said that there's just too many events. They felt like they had to go to the Silver Series events for the points, even though they didn't really have to. They were less points than the other large events, and you could certainly get by with performing well at the other larger events. But I think that this was an answer to what the players have been asking for, and that's just a more condensed tournament schedule. I think it adds an importance to all of the Disc Golf Pro Tour events. It's less events that the Pro Tour has to support. That goes for infrastructure, camera people, just everything else that they were doing with the Silver Series events they don't have to do now. I do like the qualifying series. I do think it gives a chance to more regional pros to potentially get their tour card. I think it's still going to be extremely competitive though, but I like that they're adding that in there.
Okay, Zach, respond to Wes a little bit.
Well, it sounds like he just confirmed everything I said in the initial argument and just like agreed with me all the way across the board here. Look, this is a positive move. Is this the end look of what the tour is going to look like in the future? Possibly not, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. They got rid of the Silver Series, which was designed and intended for kind of those regional players or like the mid-tier levels to be able to earn their points for the tour card or for whatever. And this is now changing it so that it's actually relevant for that. Guys like Chandler Fry, if they're struggling on the tour, can go down and play at those events and get their points, but you're not really going to see those top tier pros come down to it. It's going to do exactly what's intended, and that's important.
Wes, bring it home. Why do you deserve to win duel number 2?
Yeah, I think my differentiation here is this is about the players. I think it's obviously a change for the tour, but this is really more about the players. The pro players wanted this more condensed schedule. The regional pros want to have these qualifying series. The pro tour events are very expensive when you start getting into travel and entry fees, and then you still did have that higher level of competition. So this is going to make it a little bit more manageable for those regional pros. But my difference here is this is about the players. Obviously, this is a good thing. We see that the Disc Golf Pro Tour has been very proactive in making positive changes for the tour, but this is for the players.
All right, I think, Wes, you summed it up well at the end. I think it is about the players. I think that's the point that needed to be driven home. And for that reason, I'm going to give you the edge here, even though you guys both did say similar things about what the tour got right here with this change. So Wes takes the point in duel number 2, sends us to duel number 3. Seth, you are back up. Wes, you are still on the floor, but Seth is going to be going first. Krista Tattar, she's over 100,000 in earnings again. She won the 4 major Grand Slam, and she just got engaged. Is this the greatest single season of disc golf we have ever seen, Seth?
Yeah, so I think to answer this question, we have to understand a little bit about disc golf history. And I'm going to try to do something that hasn't been done in Leppy Duels history, which is win 2 debates at once. So there's a really interesting thing in regards to the terminology around the sport right now, which is the modern era of disc golf. And I think that we have to look at what is the sport now versus what the sport was. So Juliana Korver probably has arguably one of the most dominant seasons in disc golf. In 1999, this was in the middle of her 6-season run of primary wins. In 1999, she played 31 events, won 30 of them. The only difference is that the competition level wasn't there, the money wasn't there. And so all of those things would tell you that in the modern era where there is competition, where there is money, Kristen is by far smashing the field right now.
All right. So, Wes, what are you going to do in this duel here?
Yeah, absolutely no disrespect to Kristen. She's having one of the greatest seasons of all time. But I think if we want to look at the greatest season of all time, we go back to 2015. And I think we're all going to be familiar with this one because there was some discs produced. It is Macbeth's Grand Slam year where he won 19 out of 25 events, finished top 3 in all of them, had the what we'll call modern level of competition, maybe not the very, very recent level of competition, but certainly modern level of competition. Took all 5 majors down. I think when you look at what he was doing against a very competitive MPO field, and again, we're comparing different eras, or Seth is anyway, looking at Juliana and Kristen, so we're going to just compare apples and oranges here with MPO and FPO. I think Paul's 2015 Grand Slam season is probably the greatest season that we've had.
All right, so definitely some differentiation. Seth, go ahead and respond to Wes and tell us why it's not Macbeth's 2015 in particular.
Yeah, so I think if you're going to throw out the idea of trying to just keep this within the realm of FPO, when you look at what's happening with Macbeth's season in 2015, this was pre-Pro Tour, where we didn't have the level of competition that we actually do today. Even I would argue to some extent that the competition that Paul Macbeth was playing up against, even in the MPO division, was not as staunch as what Kristen is seeing in the FPO division. But to further that a little bit more, I think the thing that stands out is something that Jacob mentioned in the question, which is Kristen is the only player, not the only FPO player, the only player to have 2 six-figure seasons in career earnings. And I think that that is all that you need to know who wins this side.
Okay, Wes, so you're going to disagree with Seth, obviously. You're saying Macbeth has the greatest single season of all time. Go ahead and double down on that and tell us why.
Yeah, well, we lost one of her biggest competitors, biggest rivals when Paige Pierce went out this year. Now, Kristen had already won several events by then and was clearly having a great season, but I think it's very easy to compare the FPO field right now to the MPO field in 2015. Yes, we might not have had the Disc Golf Pro Tour, but there were still a lot of really good disc golfers that were traveling around and playing these events and taking disc golf very seriously at a professional level. So I think if you're looking at the quality of the fields in MPO and FPO today, those are certainly very comparable. And I think what Paul did in the MPO with bigger fields, with what I'm going to call equal competition, was just more impressive for me. Again, 19 out of 25 wins in the MPO field is absolutely astonishing. In 5 majors versus Kristen's 4 for the Grand Slam, gives him 1 more than her too.
All right, so interesting argument. Obviously, it's subjective. I actually agree with Seth here. I think Kristen is having the greatest season we have ever seen. Obviously, it's not over yet. However, as far as this duel goes, I think Wes's point as far as comparing the MPO and FPO fields, how we have it now and how they compare 2015 versus 2023, I think that was a very interesting point you made, and I think that gives you the edge here. So congratulations, Wes, on the win. Second win of the episode for you. Sends us to duel number 4, Brian and Zach. Macbeth made a tweet during the USWDGC recently talking about the modern era and what exactly does that look like. It's a phrase that's thrown around all the time, but nobody actually puts a figure to it. So I'm going to ask you guys, what is the modern era? What denotes the modern era for you? Brian, take it away.
All right, so I think there's a lot of interesting numbers you could throw out and a lot of interesting years you could throw out, and I think Seth would really like to dive in more to this, but I'm going to give you a rough the 3rd week of February 2021. It's that recent. That's when the modern era began, and that is when Paul Macbeth re-upped with Discraft and announced the 10-year, $10 million. So Paul is actually critiquing himself in a small way right there of when the modern era began, because that's when major eyes from outside of the sport started focusing on it. We had the beginning of the boom of COVID and the players coming into it, so there's more eyes, there's more ways that got into the media, the shares, the things like that. So for me personally, the modern era is very, very new. It's 2.5 years old roughly. I think that's what we need to think of, and it's kind of hard for people that have been around for a while to put a door or a stopper between what was and what will be. But I think we need to look that it's more recent than we want it to be.
Okay, Zach, interesting take from Brian. When does the modern era start for you?
This question could be answered, like we've already pointed out, a multitude of different ways depending on how you're interpreting this. I kind of looked at this question under the lens of what was like the intent of Paul's reaction, right? Paul's looking at something and saying, this is saying the modern era. What is their interpretation and why is Paul upset by that? And there's a validity to that, him being upset, because if it is as recent as Brian is saying, which is 2021, 2022 in that time frame, then like we're comparing something that has no depth to it at all. We're saying she's the only one to ever do this, and it's like, well, it's only happened for 2 years. Of course, she's the only one to ever do it. Similar to $100,000 back-to-back years. Well, we've never had more money in the pool for FPO ever. So when 5 years down the road, we're going to see more and more of that happen, and it won't be as impressive. Same thing like movie tickets. Oh, the new blockbuster shows. Yeah, because everything is more expensive. So I don't know if that comparison is really fair. For me, what I think their intention was with saying the modern era is probably the initiation of the European Open as being a consistent major. And that was back in 2006 when that was first introduced. It was a back-to-back year, then it was every other. But I think that's the reference that we're trying to make. And I think it's valid for Paul to say, I'd like you to put a number to it so we can see what we're comparing. But that to me would be closer to what their intent was. And that's what I would call it as a modern era right now.
Okay, so if we're going to narrow it down to years, we've got 2021 versus 2006, beginning of the European Open, or the entrance to the European Open as a major. Go ahead and build off of that. Brian, you've got the floor.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of other dates between 2006 and 2022 that would have been a better argument on that one, Zach. But for sure, I think you have to realize that it's so much closer than it is. We're going to argue about Champions Cup here coming up, and that's only been around for 2 years as well. So those are the things that we have to think about and realize that we've kind of just crested that plateau of our growth, just gotten to that level. So we have to, keep it in the rearview mirror and enjoy it and grasp it. But things are about to change because all those stats about the last 2 years are going to change again in the next 2 years.
Zach?
Yeah, I get it's just going to come back to the point of like, what are we reacting to? What is Paul reacting to? They're claiming something's a modern era, and I think it's too shallow for them to pretend like it's the last couple of years. Are we transitioning to a new era right now? That's very debatable. And Brian might have some points that right now we are taking a swing into a new era right now, but I don't think that's what Paul's reacting to. I think that right now, the way we kind of look at disc golf right now and looking at the modern era, we're looking at something that has been somewhat consistent that we can kind of compare over the last time period, which in 2006, European Open being introduced as a consistent major is an anchor point that we can see historically with relative similar technology that we can make a comparison for.
All right, I like both of your opinions. We're completely different, but I'm glad you said what you said, and it's an interesting question. Obviously, it's also very subjective. I was curious to see where you guys would take this one. I was also curious to see kind of what Paul Macbeth would have to say, expanding on his initial tweet. But I like where you guys went with it. As far as points to back up your take, I think Zach took a little bit longer to get to the meat of his argument in his initial statement, and that's kind of going to differentiate you guys here. So Brian is going to win this duel. Sends us to duel number 5. Brian, you're back up. Wes, you'll be taking him on. Wes, you'll be up first. As previously alluded to by Brian in his response to the last question, the Champions Cup, the International Disc Golf Complex obviously is going through some clear cutting, or will be going through some clear cutting due to a beetle infestation. Very unfortunate series of events there. But what's your recommendation from you guys to preserve the consistency of a young new major in the Champions Cup? Wes?
Yeah, personally, I would like to see what the IDGC looks like. I think a lot of people maybe don't understand that there are 3 courses there. So when you see the number of trees that are being cut, that's probably across the entire property, which is at least the 3 courses and maybe around that. So I would like to see what the course looks like. I wouldn't be mad if they had the major there this year if the course is still comparable. But I think that the right thing to do here is to look at who designed that course, and that's John Houck. He's a really famous disc golf course designer. He's done a lot of courses around the United States. I think part of the beauty of the W.R. Jackson course was the design that John Houck was able to put on that property. And so I think if we looked at other John Houck designed properties, we could kind of get a similar feel of a course for this major. The W.R. Jackson course is very special, holds a lot of special place in a lot of people's hearts just for nostalgia reasons. But I think if we're going to preserve the Champions Cup and kind of the momentum that it's been building, I think we look at other John Houck designed courses. We find the next best one, and that's where we move things.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, so the Champions Cup is too new for me to have nostalgia about it. It happened once at the IDGC, and then they told everyone it was going to go to Toboggan, and we were all excited. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't going to Toboggan. So it's happened twice there. So nostalgia isn't really a big thing as far as preserving its, legacy or whatever. We have to look at moving it to a different location, and then we can bring it back. One of the most iconic sporting events in the world is the Rose Bowl, held out in sunny California. Well, guess what? During World War II, it was held in Duke Stadium on the East Coast. Sometimes things have to change for circumstances. Right now, we might not have some trees, so let's move it around. Cute point with the John Houck West, totally agree, but let's give an opportunity to maybe put it as a rotating one on the course we already know in tour. So let's call OTB Open the Champions Cup or something. Just keep it moving until WR Jackson is ready to rock and roll, and then bring it back there.
Okay, Wes, go ahead and respond to his comments. They were similar, but a little bit different than you as well.
Yeah, super key points I think I made there. Listen, I'd be happy to volunteer at Birchfield. We can get to work out there right now and make some changes and get that thing ready for the Champions Cup next year. Just feel free to reach out. Pro Tour will make it happen. I think if we look at the word consistency in this question, that's really what we're looking at here, and that's what I'm hammering home with the John Houck design. If we want to preserve the consistency, the feel of the course, what the course brings to the tournament, the shot selection, what these players have to achieve, I think that you do that by finding a similar designed course. So if we're going to maintain or preserve the consistency of the Champions Cup, not necessarily the nostalgia, you're right, it's only been 2 years, it's a new major, but if we're looking at the consistency of it, I think that's the route that we go.
I'm going to assume Jacob asked me to rebuttal here. So I think we need to look at the fact that we were hammering home the word consistency. Consistency is hard for me to define in 1.5 years, really. So for me, I just say just keep moving it on. Let's be inconsistent about it. Let's own the fact that it hasn't been consistent. Move it to somewhere else, and then we can settle it back down later.
All right, so this is an interesting way that you guys took this. You took it a similar direction. Wes offers up Birchfield up in Lansing, Michigan, if you guys don't know where that is. Brian's saying, hey, let's move it around, but then let's bring it back once we get this figured out. Wes, I loved your initial point, which Brian did touch on and make a comment about John Houck's design and maybe building off of that. This one's a toss-up, and I'm going to give it to Brian here. So we've got a 2-2 with Wes and Brian. Sends us to the final one, Seth and Zach. Seth, you've got a chance to join a three-way tiebreaker here. One course change to the USDGC this year. What change are you making, Seth?
Yeah, so this is one that I've actually thought was happening this year. So I've told actually quite a few pros on tour that was happening, which I have zero say over any of this. So who are they to believe me? But that is changing the order of the holes, making hole 6, hole 1, and making hole 5, hole 18. And why do we do this? We do this so that, one, all of the spectators are right there at Tournament Central. If you haven't been to the USDGC, Tournament Central is right behind the tee of hole 7 and consequently hole 6 as well. But more importantly, hole 5 has the largest gallery space of any hole on the course. And so what this means is that the maximum amount of spectators can be in a place to watch the final moments. More importantly for that, in the current iteration, you can hardly have 100 to 200 people have a good shot at the final putt. And so what it does is it completely elevates the fan experience while also maintaining some of that competitive level too with how tough hole 5 is.
Interesting, Seth. I like that a lot. Zach, what's your take here?
I didn't even know that information. That's interesting. It's a shame that that's not happening. Um, One change. So just looking over from last year, I kind of looked at the holes. I was kind of interested to see if there's any course design that needed to change immediately just by a holes perspective, or if there needed to be a change. Brody made a tweet earlier about looking for his favorite hole with the Christmas trees, hole 9 specifically. Looking at that hole, it plays the second easiest hole for all 4 rounds of last year's tournament. It's not particularly difficult. Nate Sexton even says in commentary that the ceiling of the worst score is a 4 because you go to the drop zone and then just pitch up and tap it in. And so I think there needs to be a change in that, because one of the things that really helps distinguish this event is that there's so many holes out there where you can take an eagle, like on hole 10, which is the easiest hole, but you can take triple bogey too if you choose not to do that. And so letting smart players play the holes properly or not, but I would like to change hole 9 specifically, see if they can redesign it, change something to make it a little more differentiated.
Okay, so definitely 2 different takes here. Hole 9 versus the flip-flop of the starting and ending holes, with 2 other ones in between that Seth thought was happening, along with a lot of other people that he apparently spread some rumors to. So Seth, defend that. Tell us why that's the change that needs to be made.
Yeah, so the reality is that if you've been here to the USDGC, you know that the space is limited. There's really not a whole lot of things that they can do in regards to changing the layout of the course. In fact, they've tried a few different iterations, specifically expanding out into the golf course that is on property. And the reality is that for spectator flow and for parking everyone on site, the easiest thing to do is to keep the holes where they are. And so while changing hole 9 might sound good in theory because we need a harder hole, I think in the grand scheme of things, having a hole that isn't a scoring separator doesn't really matter when there's 10 other holes on the course that are a scoring separator. What does matter is the fan experience, being able to celebrate what is referred to as one of the most prestigious wins in disc golf history. Being able to do that on what it would be hole 5 turning to hole 18 is a really big deal.
Okay, Zach, bring it home. Can you get your first win of the episode?
Well, I mean, Seth just oversimplifying my argument, saying that I just want it to be a harder hole, isn't what I'm saying. It needs to be a better differentiated hole. Like, that's the point that's being made there. Whether that's just putting all the scores that are possible into play. As in changing the order, like we've talked about nostalgia earlier this episode, it definitely changes the course when you're finishing on a different hole than hole 18. That hole specifically right now, the one we end on, has so many dangers. We saw even in the Monday qualifier, one person who was qualifying takes a double or triple bogey and then jumps himself out of qualifying. There's so much drama, so much like things that have happened on that hole in the past that it's really hard to imagine what that course would look like when it's not in that order anymore. So I think that it should stay the way it is right now. I understand that the spectators, but I think I still think that the order matters right now with nostalgia. I like changing hole 9 better.
All right, Zach, I think you made some great points there down the stretch in your rebuttal to tell us why hole 18 shouldn't be getting flipped around. However, I would have liked to hear a little bit more from you, specifically what needs to change about hole 9, if you would tweak the layout that it is right now, moving the tee pad, moving the basket, such like that, or show us a place on the property for a different hole. For that reason, I'm going to lean towards Seth on this one. He did have a small advantage, obviously being on the ground and spreading the rumors about his change already. So Seth is going to win, sends us to a 3-way tiebreaker. Seth, you're going to lead us off. Brian, you've got second. Wes, you've got third. We just saw earlier this week a couple of people get into the USDGC through the Monday qualifier. So of those people that squeaked into the field at the last second, who has the best chance to cash this weekend? Seth?
Okay, so I did more research than Wes or Brian did, so they can thank me for all of the information that they're about to build their arguments off of. The 5 people who qualified were Luke Callahan, 974 rated, Jonathan Blackburn, 981 rated, Nathaniel Johnson, 997 rated, Zach Melton, 998 rated, and Randon Lotta, 1007 rated. Of those 5 players, only one player has played the USDGC more than once. That is Zach Melton. Zach Melton has played the USDGC 6 different times. Of those 6 different times, he has finished in the top 20 3 of those times. He has cashed 5 of those times. Zach Melton, while he is the easy pick because he is the most seasoned, he is the one who has the most to prove here and the most to win by having all of those skill sets that come with playing the course in a tournament mindset 6 different times. So I'm going to go with Zach Melton.
Okay, Brian, so Zach Melton's off the board unless you're going to take him as well. What's your take here?
Yeah, let's give this win to Wes. I'm going to take Zach Melton too. One, because Zach Melton and I have had broken bread together, and I appreciate Zach Melton as a human. But two, I have no connection to Zach Melton besides the one time we had dinner. He doesn't throw my favorite plastic. He's left-handed. He's beautiful. I'm not. He's great at pickleball. I'm terrible. All of those things. But I do have a connection for is coming back from injury. It makes a great story. It's good for the media. Love to see it. I was really sad when he missed it last year. Glad he's recovered. He's going to come back. He plays 22nd in 2021. Love to see him get up that by that top 20 line.
All right, Wes, they're teeing you up. Who you picking?
We're going with the hot hand. This is what you have to do in disc golf. This is what I apply to my disc golf betting strategies. You have to look at the hot hand. Zach Melton is the easy choice. We know this course favors forehand players. Zach's a lefty. He's basically a righty forehand player. We can debate that some other time. So, of course, Zach has a good chance to do well at this, but you have to look at who's been playing well, who's not coming off injury, and that's Luke Callahan. Coming off of the Carolina Clash where he averaged 10-22, had his best tournament ever. Really high-level A tier, a lot of really good pros there. Really good finish for him. He finished 5th there, averaging that 10-22. He comes in, he ties the hot round in the qualifier. Continues, that's 4 hot rounds in a row for Luke. So if we're looking at the hot hand, he threw a great round in the qualifier, which I would debate that there's actually more pressure in that qualifier than there is even in the actual tournament to get in. I think if we're looking at who's got the best chance to cash, we're talking about Luke Callahan.
All right, so Wes goes a different direction than the other two. Seth, you've got the first response.
Yeah, so we all knew that Wes was going to pick the Disc Golf Underground player. So, that's no surprise there. But more importantly, if we're going to build off of Wes's logic, Randon Lotto should be the person that we would pick. He took 2nd at the Seth Burton Memorial, another A tier that was played this past weekend. But if you look at Randon's history, Randon only played the USDGC last year where he finished 80th. What we know historically is that Monday qualifiers who don't have experience on this course tend to finish outside of the cash. People who do have experience on this course coming in to play Monday qualifying, one, they generally make it in off of Monday qualifying, hence why Randon and Zach both made it in. But more importantly, they are the ones who typically go on to cash and have the higher performances out of the Monday qualifiers. So Zach Melton is the easy win.
Brian?
Yeah, I think we already told everyone that Zach Melton was the right answer. I don't know why. He's left-handed. It's a right-handed forehand. He finished in 22nd a couple years. More importantly, Zach has more Instagram followers. It's better for the sport. All right, we got to think of the bigger picture here. All right, beautiful little photo of him. Maybe it's 4th card, 5th card with some other big names. It's got 22,000. Let's bump those numbers up. Let's go, baby.
Okay, Wes, why is it Luke Callahan?
He's the hot hand. I think Zach Melton is the easy choice. He's a lefty. He's been here before, but I don't think that is going to give him a great advantage coming back off of injury. Obviously, he's playing well. He made it through the Monday qualifier. But if we're looking at the hot hand, Luke Callahan averaging 10-22 last weekend. He brings that 10-22 into this weekend. I think he's going to smoke the rest of the Monday qualifiers.
All right, Wes, obviously you've got a little bit of bias and a little bit of skin in the game here with the Discraft Underground. Seth, you may or may not have some skin in the game too with Zach Melton, and Brian, you're just here for the ride. Happy to be in the tiebreaker. I appreciate it. Wes, I wish you would have included that Luke Callahan is familiar with that area of the country, being from there as a young kid, and he's not home, but very close to home, and I think that's an important note. But I'm still going to give you the win for the episode. Congratulations. What do you got for us?
Yeah, disc golf is in such an interesting place right now. We saw this year disc golf has kind of plateaued, and so I really want to challenge everybody to find new ways to grow the sport. Historically, when we talk about growing the sport, we talk about getting in new courses, we talk about running tournaments and some of those things. But I think the real challenge in disc golf right now is just getting more eyes on disc golf. And when you look at football, I'm a huge football fan, but I have no interest in putting on football pads and going out and getting beat up by a bunch of other dudes trying to run the football or block or whatever. And that's what we need right now in disc golf is people getting into these storylines, people getting into disc golf outside of just players. I think a great way to get people involved in disc golf is to take them out to the course, get a disc in their hand, and get them playing, and then they kind of go from there. But I just want to challenge everybody to come up with some creative ideas on how we can get people more interested in disc golf without them having to be players in disc golf. I think that's kind of our conundrum right now. There's a lot of brilliant people out there. I know somebody's going to come up with something, and so I just want to challenge everybody to think about that and to grow the sport in a new way.
Thank you, Wes. Well said. Why don't we challenge you guys at home that are watching? Go ahead and toss something in the comments below. Answer Wes's question. Can we find a creative way to get people involved in playing disc golf? So that's your challenge at home. Thanks for watching, everybody. Again, congrats to Wes. Thanks to Brian, Seth, and Zach for being here. We appreciate you guys a lot. Everybody at home, enjoy the USDGC. Seth, enjoy it in person, and we will see you guys all next week. Thanks for watching.